how's it going? I'm Ina Golden and welcome to my vlog. Before we start, I need to apologise for the difference in camera quality this time. The camcorder I've been using doesn't want to work for me today. I really need to replace it. So I'm using the camera on my laptop. Hopefully the sound and picture quality will be alright. I won't know until I finish recording this, and I want to get this up for you guys sooner rather than later. Anyway, with that said, let's get on with today's topic, which happens to be so Echoe, briefly, is the book, the most recent book that I've had published. It's currently only available in ebook format, places like Amazon, Nook, etc, etc, etc. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, I'm afraid. So if you want to go check it out, do so, based on what you think of it, based on what I've said on this video. But the aim of this video is not by any means to try to convince you to buy the book. Please don't think that's what that is, or what this is. It's, the aim of this video is because this is a book that I'm particularly passionate about right now, that I, have a great deal of fondness and a great deal of love for, both in terms of, having written it, and in terms of the characters from it, and in terms of what it means to me and what it represents for me, as well as, whatever. Anyway, enough of that. Let's actually get on with what I'm here to talk about, which is Echoe, both the book and the character. So it all started about 2-3 years ago, when a friend of mine, who also happens to be a writer, her name is Jade Hamilton, and fingers crossed she'll be starting her own vlog soon. When she does, I'm totally going to let you guys know about it and link you to her, because she's much more interesting than I am. she's worth it. She's worth it. Much love. Anyway, my dear friend Jade, she happens to be all about the radio plays at the moment. But the type of fiction that she writes is mostly what we refer to as straight fiction or pure fiction, and it's very much human interest stories. So a lot of her characters, or a lot of her main characters, are disabled, or they're caring for people with disabilities, or there's some part of the social care system. It's for her, she's very passionate about trying to show the other side of the coin, the other side of these situations, to try to make people think a little bit more about what it's really like living in these situations, or what potentially it could be like living in these situations. She's very passionate about giving another point of view and another side of the argument, as it were. At the same time, she's always admired the fact that I'm a fantasy writer. She admires the types of things that I write, and she's read a number of my things, including my fan fiction. She might not have been into the thing the fan fiction was based on, but she's read my fan fiction. And she enjoys the way that I present characters, the way that I tackle the theme of how I tackle fantasy, and mixing of genres and stuff like that. So she approached me. Well, I say approached, we mostly talk online these days. So she IM'd me. she IM'd me a request. Her request was for me to write a fantasy story with a wheelchair-using single mother with telekinetic abilities as the main character. So I was like, okay, I will see what I can do with this. And 24 hours later, I came back to her and I was like, honey, I know who the main character is. Her name is Echoe. She has 2 children, a daughter named Piccolo and a son named Synth. And just went from there, and I outlined what was the initial concept of the story, which was a fantasy romance type plot. Just because, writing it for her, I felt that that was the kind of topic, that was the kind of subject that she would appreciate. I don't think I would have been wrong. If it had ended up being a fantasy romance, I think she would have been more than happy. Unfortunately, once I actually sat down and started writing it, what I initially felt was just going to be like a subplot sort of ended up taking over, and more of these thriller elements from this subplot started to filter in and take over, and what I ended up with was nothing like what I thought I was going to end up with. It, for me, was so much better than what I thought I was going to end up with. Not saying that I can't do romance or that romance stories are bad. No, I love romance stories and I love writing romantic subplots. But yeah, that's the thing. I love writing romantic subplots. Not so keen on writing romantic main plots, just because it's not. For me, it's not how I like to structure a story. That, the building of relationships should be part of the context of the story. It shouldn't necessarily be the whole story itself. You've got to have something driving the plot forward, and although yes, plots driven forward by romance can be fantastic, I find it's easy doing the subplots. Having said that, Echoe does not end up with anybody at the end of the book. Spoilers, I know, major spoilers, but only because the way the plot changed, the way the book changed, it felt unrealistic for this character to end up with somebody at the end of the book. I'm not going to say if she ends up with the potential of ending up with somebody at the end of the book. I think potentially she could end up in a relationship after the book. There's definite signs that things might progress that way for her in the future, but because that was no longer the focus of the book, ending her in a relationship didn't seem right. It didn't fit right to me at all. So what did the book end up being? I like to describe it as being a fantasy with thriller elements. And the reason I sort of put it that way is I'm not sure I can class it as a true thriller. I don't read a lot of. I watched a lot of thriller type movies, especially like the psychological thrillers and the psychological horrors. So I understand what they are as a genre, but I haven't really read very many thrillers. So I don't know how thrillery it is within that genre. But there are definitely thriller elements to the story. There are definitely, those elements and those moments, and that. I think it's the pacing I lack a little bit, more than anything else. But yeah, no, it definitely has the thriller elements there, and it definitely has the sort of, dark moments there that I'm so good at writing. I don't know if it's good or just enjoy, but so that's how I sort of define its genre, fantasy with thriller elements. So the world in which Echoe is set is a world that I very much wanted to explore a little bit more in relation to my multiverse. So I went for the realm in which my enchanted breeds live. So yes, it's a story where there are nymphs and imps and sprites and fairies and whatever else. The reason I sort of decided to set it within that realm, within the multiverse, was because I haven't really explored it very much, and for a story that was going to be completely disconnected from pretty much everything I've written before, I felt it was important to set it somewhere that was completely disconnected to everything that I've done before. Well, not completely disconnected. I've explored characters from this particular realm, but I've not explored the realm itself. So I was like, okay, well, I know that within this realm, this is how my enchanted breeds sort of behave, and I know that there are different types of fairies, there are different types of pixies, there are different types of this, that, and the other. So I have a basic understanding of this world. Let's explore it a little bit more. So I was kind of like, well, at what point in this history of this world am I going to set it? And I was like, modern day would be interesting. Although I think it sort of ended up being more late 90s, early 2000s, just based on some of the technology that they use. There don't seem to be any mobile phones around, or if there are, they're not overly prevalent. I don't know quite why it ended up being sort of set there. I don't think that was sort of a deliberate conscious choice. I think that was the best feel for the world, this sort of pseudo-modern fantasy fairy world. And I think part of choosing that setting was during the initial concepting, or during the initial ideaing, these are not words, during the initial creation of the concept for it, when it was still a fantasy romance, the idea of it being a modern fairy tale made a lot of sense. I still think of it as being a modern fairy tale, even though it's not. It's never really been a fairy tale. Depending on how you define fairy tale. There's something nice about thinking about it being sort of a modern version of, or a modernisation of the idea of a fairy, enchanted creature type world, because there's sort of a tendency with a lot of these stories that the enchanted creatures themselves are almost living in like this sort of archaic society, or at least everything that I've seen. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if there's stuff out there that sort of has, you know, fairies living in their own modern society, and I don't mean fairies in a modern society that is our society, I mean their own modern society. I don't know, as I said, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm more than willing to be corrected on this. Okay, so we've sort of covered the setting a little bit now. So now we can move on to the basic plot itself. So the basic plot starts with Echoe having just finished work on a particular project. Echoe being what is referred to in the world as being a Neath nymph. And Neath are known for being heavily involved in the theatrical world. Most of them are actors, lots of them work behind the scenes, they enjoy being in the theatrical world. It's something that they are passionate about, something that they garner great enjoyment out of. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily the best at it, it just means it's something that, you know, they feel makes them complete. Or, you know, nine times out of 10, that's what they feel like they need to do. That's what they feel like they need to make themselves, you know, whatever. Anyway, she's been working a lot behind the scenes, so she writes her own plays, she's done a little bit of directing, she's done a little bit of producing, just through, you know, various chances that she's managed to garner for herself. And she has decided that it's time for her to actually get up on stage and start acting herself. Part of the reason she hasn't done before this point is because her grandfather, basically didn't want her to, because he was very discriminative towards her because she was disabled and because she refused to continue the treatment that could have potentially cured her of her disability. He basically decided, no, I'm disowning you, the family have to disown you, although, you know, her parents don't actually disown her. She's kicked out the house and everything. He's really, really nasty piece of work, from what you hear of him. Anyway, he basically, you know, made it very, very difficult even for her to get the jobs that she did get behind the scenes. But he's been dead now for a couple of years. Both of her children are now in school, so she feels like now's the time for her to actually start pursuing a career in acting, because that's what she always wanted, really. That's what she always dreamed about. And as chance would have it, a friend of hers is putting on a production of a play that she's loved since she was a child. It's a play that was written for her grandmother, that her mother, performed in before her, and they both took obviously the leading roles. And it's one that's been performed a few times over the years and has always been highly acclaimed. But she's not going in after the leading lady. She doesn't want the leading role. She wants one of the comic relief characters, and she wants to be in that comic relief, that character acting sort of role. And so she goes into the open auditions, and her friend is very it's encouraging. Her particular friend is a very lively, it's a very fun character for me to write. There was a moment when I was editing, and there was just a line said by this particular character who's called Lila, and I just stopped what I was doing for a second and went, this is why I love you. This is why I love you. You're just such a fantastic character. I don't know if other people will feel that way when they start reading. But yeah, no, she was a great character, right? Very fun, very energetic. Anyway, she gives Echoe the chance that Echoe wants. Won't spoil whether or not she's successful, but what I will say is from that moment of the audition onwards, things don't run particularly smoothly. I think in the write-up description I say lots of little accidents start happening, and it slowly starts to become apparent that someone or something is out to get Echoe for some reason, and her life is potentially in danger, although she's not completely sure who it is and she's not completely sure why it is. She's got plenty of theories, she's got plenty of ideas, but she's not completely sure who, what, why, where, or any of that. And this, as I said, this is the thrillery element to it, and it's basically the story of her trying to find out what's going on and trying to save herself, as it were. And again, I won't spoil anything. I won't tell you if she's successful or not. Just that, yeah, that's the plot in a nutshell. And you get to know a lot about Echoe through the course of this story, both in terms of how she is as a mother, what she's like as a mother, what she's like as a friend, what she's like as a little bit what she's like as an actor, and how she copes with the world a little bit. Probably not as much of it there as it should be, and how the world copes with her, and again probably not as much of it there as it should be, especially given the setup with the grandfather. But the particular friend Jade, who I've written this for, she is herself disabled, and she has spent a lot of time reading this along with me, and she's not had any issues with the presentation of Echoe in this story, which I'm hoping is a good thing. But again, you guys can be the judge. And yeah, it's a story that I like and I enjoyed writing, and I enjoy going back and looking at it again, and I enjoyed the process of editing it both times that I've gone through and editing it, how I've strengthened certain things, how I've changed certain things to make it as interesting and as good a story as I could possibly make it. And it does mean quite a lot to me, not just because it's one of the few times when I've actually written for somebody else. It also means a lot to me because in the last 5 or so years I have been diagnosed with various medical conditions myself, and I've had to relearn how to cope with life and how to go through and do certain things in a slightly different way to how I would do before, because it does affect my daily existence, it does affect who I am. it's changed who I am as a person. It's changed how I interact with the world very much. And you know, writing this story didn't necessarily help me gain that understanding, but it helped me feel like I could find a new place. I could find myself somewhere better than I was, and that I am still a strong person, that I am still a capable person, that, you know, all of this stuff doesn't take that away from me. It changes me, but it doesn't make me less than I was. It doesn't make me a lesser person. And yeah, it's I wouldn't go so far as saying it was cathartic, but it does mean a lot to me, and I am very passionate about the idea that there should be more leading characters out there who are disabled, who do have medical conditions, and especially in genres that people don't usually associate it with, so like the fantasy genre. Very passionate about, you know, there being more in the fantasy genre. And you know, that's more, I've personally not come across very much of it. There's probably more out there than I realise. I'm not necessarily sure if there are a lot more that have disabled working single mothers with telekinetic abilities. I think that's very specific to this book, but you know, I could be wrong. I could not be the first. But yeah, no, it means a lot to me for those kind of reasons. And which now brings me on to talking about Echoe itself, which is why it was so important for me to make sure that Echoe was independent, or as independent as she could be, that she was strong-willed, that she had agency in her own story, that events weren't just happening to her and she was just allowing them to happen to her. You know, that she was able to question things, that she was able to motivate herself to do something about the situation, that she was able to be both strong and vulnerable at the same time. And what I mean by that is, I didn't want her to just be like this cold, self-determined woman. I mean, she's got a lot of humanity in her. I mean, she's a mother, and she's not a perfect mother by any means. She struggles. She, you know, struggles to understand her children sometimes. She struggles with, you know, working out what she should do as a parent, and that's what I mean about the vulnerability. It's not she's vulnerable because she's disabled, she's vulnerable because she's human and she doesn't know how to deal with these situations, just like anybody else wouldn't necessarily know how to deal with these situations. And I very much try to approach her as being a character first, and I was kind of like, well, if she was any other character, would I do this? Would I put her through this? If the answer is yes, then damn it, she's going to go through it. If the answer is no, and you know, then she's damn well going to go through it. You know, I just approached her the same way I'd approach any character, but at the same time, I admire who she is as a person. I admire the struggles that she goes through. I admire everything that she's trying to do and everything that she's trying to be throughout, you know, both like pre-story and throughout the story itself. And she's a character I can very much empathise with, and I hope that other people will be very much able to empathise with, and see her as being not just a character but potentially, you know, a real person. And yeah, so why do I feel that Echoe, both the character and the book, is worth giving time to? Worth giving time to. Well, as I said before, I'm very passionate about the idea of getting more disabled characters out there in all genres, both, you know, in book format, on the radio, on TV, in films. I think there should be more positive representation of disabled characters, and I'm hoping that with Echoe I can add to that. I'm hoping with Echoe I can add to that, that I can be a contributor to the great works that are starting to come out involving disabled people, and they are starting to come out, and they are starting to become more of a thing, and I think that's great, and I want to be a part of that, not like jumping on the bandwagon type of part of that, but I want to be a supportive part of that. I want to be somebody who can sort of like say, well, yeah, it is something that's important, it is something that I care about, and it is something I want to contribute to. Not in every single story that I write, obviously, it's not going to work in every single situation, and I understand fully why it doesn't necessarily work in every single situation, but at the same time I want to feel like I can do this, that I can put this out there, and that it can have a positive impact. Secondly, I think it's a fantastic story. It excites me when I think about it, it excites me when I read it. There are characters that will make you laugh, I think. There are characters that will make you feel generic emotions here. I think I've written a good story. So ignoring everything else, I think on the basis of it, I've written a good, compelling story. It's not always the easiest to outline a story like this without giving the major plots away in order to get people excited about it. But I think it's a story that's worth being excited about. I think it's a story that is worth reading, and it's worth being out there in the world. And I'm very, very excited about people reading it, because I want people to sort of like say, oh my god, I sort of saw that ending coming, but I didn't see that ending coming. Oh, that moment, like halfway through the book, that's when I worked out what was going on. I want that. I want that. I want people to sort of like have these different experiences with the book, and have these different experiences with the characters within the book. And I want people to say, oh, that was my favourite character, or, you know, that was my favourite shipping going on within the story. I want people to get excited about it, because I'm excited about it. It's hard to get everything you need into a video like this without giving major spoilers away, to talk about something without giving major plot points away, because those are the plot points that I'm excited about. And they're the plot points that make it worth reading, but you don't want to give too much of it away. You can't do that. You need something for people to want to, you know, to want to read. So, yeah, I'm hoping that how excited I get talking about it is going to be encouraging enough on those sorts of things. So, with that said, if this has encouraged you to check out Echoe, please, please, please go check it out. Part of the reason it's released only on ebook format at the moment is because it's so much cheaper to publish things in ebook format, both in terms of the actual publishing side of it, and in terms of you as readers buying it. And being an unknown author as I am, it's important that first and foremost my work is accessible to the people who want to read it, without them going, well, that's a lot of money to be taking a chance on somebody I don't know. And you know, I've experienced that in the past, where the company that I've gone with for publishing whatever has essentially priced me out of the market, because they've put the book at such a high price. I'm just like, nobody's going to buy it at that price. Nobody's going to take a chance on somebody unknown at that price. So I was very, very determined this time around that I was going to make it affordable for people, and hopefully eventually I will have a paperback version of it out. But you know, that all depends on getting enough readers and getting enough interest to begin with to sort of make it worth it. And in the meantime, I just want it to be, you know, as affordable for people who want to take an interest and who want to take a chance as possible. So yeah, that's all we're gonna get. The next episode, I think I'm going to talk about the multiverse. I mentioned it briefly near the beginning of this video, and I'm hoping some of you have kind of gone, multiverse? Where's she going with this? So I figured the next episode being about the multiverse might be a good place to start. So I'm hoping you guys are looking forward to that now, and with all my gushing and everything else. So you think done at this point? I will say goodbye and hope to see you next time.